Welcome to another episode of Purpose Today. I'm your host, Dr. April Dobson, and I'm very excited about our episode today. We are continuing in a series that we recently started for organizational leaders, Leading Purposefully. So today we're going to talk specifically about the 90-day executive moves for immediate impact. So if you want to make an impact in your organization, you're new to an executive or senior leader position, don't go anywhere. This episode is for you. We're going to talk about how you can be intentional with your new senior leader role by clarifying expectations with stakeholders and investing in those key relationships outside the organization, how you can work to craft and communicate your leadership narrative within that first 90 days, and how you can also conduct intentional, purposeful listening tours. We're going to talk about that and more in this very special new episode of Purpose Today. We'll be right back after these sponsorship messages. Today's episode of Purpose Today is brought to you by the Purpose Professionals community in partnership with Purpose Today Global LLC. The Purpose Professionals community is available on the school platform, and this community is designed for professionals just like you and entrepreneurs who are intentional. These are professionals and entrepreneurs who are intentional about aligning their profession with their purpose. So if you're someone who wants to ensure that you're aligned with your purpose and you want to network with a community of like-minded, purposeful professionals, join the Purpose Professionals community on school. This community also helps professionals to pivot to pursue their purpose, to grow their career, to develop and purposely align their business. Scan the QR code for more information on the Purpose Professionals community. Welcome back to Purpose Today. I am super excited about our topic today because we get to delve into something that I know is going to be important for many of you who are watching on today. And certainly I invite you to place your questions and comments in the chat. I will do my best to try to address those, but certainly, if I don't have an opportunity to address them, either by answering you orally, I'll do my best to try to answer those in the chat as well. So I'm very excited to talk about this topic because I recently authored an article that I posted to LinkedIn on 12 strategic moves that successful senior leaders make in their first 90 days. And if you haven't had an opportunity to go out to LinkedIn to view that article, I do encourage you to take the time if you are available to do so. It's an excellent article and an excellent resource. And I'll also be putting that into the chat, but I recently published that article to LinkedIn. But I want us to actually unpack what I've put in there. I know that it wasn't possible to put everything in the article. So I wanted us to just look at each of these things and ensure that we all have the tools that we can use as we are navigating in a new role as a senior leader and or executive. So certainly, I encourage you to grab a pen and paper. And I would also love for you to put into the chat if you've used any of these approaches before. And if there are approaches that you haven't used, then certainly how you can incorporate those into your new role as an executive or senior leader. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I know that there were some that you were able to see on the intro of this episode. But the very first one that we're going to talk about is clarifying expectations. You want to sit down with key stakeholders. You want to invest in key relationships outside the organization as well. So it's very important to ensure that you're clarifying expectations with key stakeholders and you're investing in those key relationships outside the organization. This is very important in throughout your tenure, but especially in the first 90 days. You want to make sure that you're sitting down to identify that you have been partnering and collaborating, and not just you, really the leaders within your organization who you have the pleasure of leading, those who you have the opportunity of empowering and supporting. You want to ensure that you have and that they have all of the key stakeholders involved in what you're doing, all of the initiatives. And you want to also ensure that anyone who you lead directly or indirectly as a direct report or as a second level, that everyone is aware of those key relationships and that everyone has what they need to ensure that you all are successful. And this is the time that it's important to be able to talk about what are the priorities on both sides of the table. What is how each stakeholder and each leader, how do they define success? Because success may not look the same for your external stakeholders as it does for certain key stakeholders that are within the organization. And it certainly may not look the same for leaders who are on your team. And so it's very important to be able to sit down early on, have these discussions. And this gives an opportunity for you all to come together and identify what you can partner on, what you can collaborate on, and really what should be the collective goal and the successes that everyone wants to achieve collectively and collaboratively. And this is going to be great because it's going to help to drive growth. This is going to help to be able to effectively manage and reduce any risk. So I think it's key to ensure that you're clarifying those expectations with key stakeholders and you're making the effort to ensure that you're investing in those key relationships, both inside and outside the organization. And so the next one that we're going to talk about that is important in the that's important in the process as you are working through the first 90 days. You want to ensure that you're taking the time to craft and communicate your leadership narrative. Now, this is very important because sometimes when you are at a new organization, because you're new to the organization or you're in a new role, you may have individuals who are unclear about what your perspectives are, what's your philosophy, what's your viewpoint, what do you value, right? What do you really have as your vision, and how does your vision align with the organization's mission? So you want to make sure that whatever your priorities are, that you're transparent with that from the beginning. You want to make sure that you're doing everything to build trust with everyone in your organization. And it's not only important to simply articulate the information regarding your narrative, but you want to give as much insight as possible in terms of the purpose. And you also want to ensure that you are taking the time to see what has been achieved prior to your assumption of the role, and being able to recognize those accomplishments. And as you're speaking about what your vision is and what your values and your priorities are, you're being able to reference back to the successes that have already occurred that align with that. So people don't assume that you're not acknowledging the value that they've brought, that you're not acknowledging what they have done to date prior to you assuming the role. I think that's very, very, very important. Now, I want to move on to talk about the next thing that you can do in the first 90 days. And that's ensuring that you're intentional and purposeful with your listening tours. Now, this sort of ties into the last part of what I was saying just a little bit ago, and finding out what has been what successes have been realized prior to you assuming the role, finding out specifically from leaders in your organization, finding out from individuals who are your direct reports, what their pain points are, finding out what it is that they desire to achieve, both for the organization and for themselves, ensuring that you find out valuable insights across all departments, across all levels. And this is the time that it's very important to ensure that you're capturing what you're observing about the culture, about how professionals, leaders, how they want to be positioned, opportunities that may not have been explored or maximized. You want to make sure that you're having the opportunity to identify that and ensure that if there are any hidden opportunities, you can ensure that those opportunities can be cultivated. You want to make sure that you're asking open-ended questions. It's very important to ask the right questions. And I want you to also give various opportunities, town halls, one-on-one meetings for leaders and everyone within your organization who you have the pleasure of leading and working alongside, to be able to ask you questions as well. But you want to set the tone that you are a leader who is concerned, and you're listening, and you're compassionate, and knowing that it's important to have the communication going and flowing in both directions. That's going to be very important for the success of your organization and for your success in the new role. So I want to just say that this, we have more that we have to unpack, and I know we're not going to get through the entire list today, but I just wanted to ensure that you all are equipped with what you need to be able to lead purposefully, to be able to make an impact in the first 90 days. And so I do believe that it's very important that as you're identifying these different tools, these different resources, that you're taking notes, and that if there's anything that's here that can help someone else, certainly, pass it along as well. And if you're getting value from what you're hearing today, I do encourage you, if you haven't already done so, to hit that subscribe button. And that way you can be kept up to speed on all of the content that I'm sharing here. And also, it'll give you an opportunity that you'll receive updates once any live event or post is available to you. So let's continue on. And I do appreciate all of you who are here live today and all the engagement that you all are putting in the chat. I certainly appreciate that. Now, everyone knows that in any organization, you have sometimes informal influencers. I believe within everyone is the leader. And so you will hear me say, not just in our episode today, but you'll hear me say throughout this episode and future episodes, my perspective, that there is a leader that's, within everyone. And so we're going to move on to our fourth one. And because you have some people who influence behind the scenes and who choose to lead behind the scenes, you don't need a title to be a leader, but you definitely want to map out those power dynamics within your organization, map out any informal networks. This is going to be very important because while every entity, every organization might have a formal organizational chart, there are other factors that, really impact organization. Culture is important, and there are people who carry the culture within an organization. So you do want to identify those culture carriers. You want to be able to specify who the influencers in your organization, who those people are, because everything that you're going to want to do is going to require buy-in. And when you have buy-in from other leaders in the organization who you have the pleasure of leading, leaders who are senior to you, it makes incorporating all of those things that you may have mentioned earlier in your leadership narrative when you mentioned what your priorities were, what your values were. As you're doing that, if you have identified the influencers and the culture carriers and whoever makes decisions informally, that's going to help you to ensure you're positioning the organization for success, because everything that you're doing as a senior leader and executive, it's to serve. I really believe in servant leadership. I believe in empowering individuals. And so you want to make sure that you're being purposeful with building those relationships, ensuring that you're being purposeful with partnering regarding the values, the vision that you have, being able to achieve the mission. But you want to partner so that you have that buy-in, and that's going to help you if there's any, resistance for any change to anything that you'd like to introduce or any of the ideas that you approve for implementation. That's going to help to reduce that resistance. And when you have the buy-in, it makes it so much more effective, and you have the synergistic effects across the organization as leaders within the organization come together and collaborate on what you're working towards. And so I believe that that's very important. And I think it is an area that should not be overlooked. So we talked about mapping those power dynamics and those informal networks. And I want us to, move on to something else that is also key. And again, we're not going to get through this entire list today, but maybe we'll get through about half of the list. But you do want to make an assessment and invite leaders within your organization. And again, everyone is a leader. Everyone has leadership on the inside of them, regardless of whether they're formally have a leadership title. But you want to assess the leadership team's strengths and gaps. See what the strengths are collectively and see what the strengths are individually, see what collective gaps exist and what individual gaps exist. I think it's important to always develop people. That is so important. I think we should do everything that we can as leaders to continue to develop. And you want to develop from the angle of a professional's purpose, like what their purpose is, and from the angle of organizational needs and being able to marry those together. And so it's very important that you are objective with the way that you are evaluating your direct reports, and that your direct reports are objective with the way that they're evaluating individuals who they supervise. And so any areas where there are opportunities for development, you want to make sure that those development opportunities are aligning with, again, like I said, the professional's purpose and with the organizational needs. And if there's anything that doesn't align, you want to make sure that you're addressing that, or you're appointing leaders within your organization to ensure that gaps are closed. And if you have talent gaps, you want to make sure that the processes are in place to do an assessment on whether or not you need development of certain skills because of the identified gaps. You want to see what opportunities there are for corporate development, again, for individual development. It's important to ensure that you're doing that timely so that you can ensure the organization is best positioned for success. And I think when you're looking at strengths and gaps as well, an important area is ensuring that people within the organization are aligned with their purpose, that they're doing what they love and what they enjoy. Having that approach will help for professionals to work to their strengths when they're doing something that they love, something that they're gifted at doing. So I think it's good to ask those questions. And if you haven't had an opportunity to view the episode that I posted about questions that every leader should ask, then I encourage you to go back to ask that, because that's going to give you some critical insight that you're going to need that will help you to assess the leadership team's strengths and gaps. And, again, any gaps are any opportunity areas, but certainly you can close those. And it's very important to do those as soon as possible. You don't want to be in an organization as a senior leader, as any level of leader, and see something and see that there is a shortfall and ignore efforts to address it. You want to ensure that anything that you can do to empower, to equip, to ensure that that other leaders within your organization are postured for success. So that is very important. Now, we're going to go on to another one, and that one is our sixth one that we're going to talk about today, and that's establishing quick wins with visible impact. It's very important that the leaders within an organization, that they see wins, right? That they can see a visible impact. That is very important. You want to be sure to do everything to have those visible, impactful, purposeful wins within an organization. And so whatever you identify during your process, because, a lot of these are interrelated, right? So as you're conducting that intentional, purposeful listening tours, as we talked about earlier in number 3, then you're likely going to see what is important. So find 1 or 2 as a recommendation, maybe even 3 if you find that it's necessary. High visibility projects that you can, in your first 90 days, have addressed very quickly. And so if there's pain points, if there are bottlenecks, anything that was identified in your tours that can be addressed and give some momentum for the organization and really show what can be done collaboratively. Because, of course, you may be the senior leader, you may be the executive within an organization, but really delivering results is a partnership, right? So it's your leadership that's overseeing the efforts, but at the end of the day, you're not able to deliver results without other, leaders, your staff, support teams. You have so many functions that come together that will allow the organization to have success. So you want to show that the organization works well together, that you're able to lead results, right? That you're results driven, but you're also ensuring that you're empowering leaders within your organization to have that success. So whatever you identified that is high visible, has high visibility, that is going to significantly reduce pain points, you want to be able to have those quick wins. That's key. And we're going to talk about a seventh thing today. And I know many of you have likely had the pleasure of starting a new position, and many of you might be looking for a new position. But these things that we're talking about today will help you to have a considerable impact in your first 90 days in a new role as an executive or other senior leader. So let's talk about another one, our number 7 on the list. And again, if you haven't had an opportunity to read the full article, I do encourage you to do so. But we're going more into depth with these 12 areas. And so even if you haven't read the article, then, certainly we're talking through it today. And if you have, there's still value because we're talking more about it beyond what was listed in the article. So the 7th one, and this will be the final one that we discuss today, and then on a future episode, we'll talk about the others. You want to ensure that you're aligning on strategic priorities and metrics. And this is very important. You may have new strategic priorities that you're introducing. There may be strategic priorities that existed prior to you assuming your new senior leader role, your new executive role. And so it's important to ensure that there is an alignment of both the strategic priorities and the metrics. Now, it's important that everyone is clear, because without clarity, it's hard for anyone to move with intention, to move with purpose in the right direction. So you want to make sure everyone's clear on the organization's top priorities, and not only what those top priorities are, but they have to also know what will be the KPIs. They have to know how success will be measured. So what are the key performance indicators? And you want to make sure that as you are being transparent with your reporting and sharing the status with leaders within your organization, leaders who you lead and leaders who are senior to you, that you're reinforcing how activities that you're doing, how plans that you have, how they align. And you want to ensure that you're checking in regularly. And when you're checking in with leaders who you have the pleasure of having as a direct report or who you're leading, you want to find out if there's anything that is needed. Are there any resources that are needed? Any information gaps, just whatever you can ensure that you are have postured the leaders in your organization for success. So giving that transparency and also checking in on where things are, and if there's anything that you need to provide or answer or address. This is very, very, very important. So I know we talked through 7 of these. As a recap, you want to, in your first 90 days, the crucial first 90 days, as a senior leader, as an executive, you want to make sure that you, 1, clarify expectations with key stakeholders and invest in key relationships outside the organization. 2, craft and communicate that leadership narrative that's important to you, articulating clearly, what your priorities are, what your vision is, what your values are. And 3, conducting those intentional, purposeful listening tours. 4, mapping out that power dynamics and informal networks. 5, assessing the leadership team's strengths and gaps. 6, establishing those quick wins with that visible impact. And then 7th, aligning on strategic priorities and metrics. And so these are things that can help you as a senior leader or executive in your first 90 days. Certainly, if there's something that you've heard today that has been helpful for you, I encourage you to put that in the chat. Love to see how this has been helpful. And again, if you're gaining value from what you've heard today and what you have heard, I do encourage you to hit that subscribe button. It's just been such a pleasure to talk to you today about leading purposefully. This is going to help organizational leaders and aspiring leaders. And these are things that you can do in the first 90 days for immediate impact. And I certainly appreciate everyone for tuning in. And if you are someone who is maybe you're aligned with your purpose, but it's time for you to progress into another position, that you've outgrown where you are, I encourage you to send an email to admin@purposetoday.com. Maybe you started in a career that seemed to be very well aligned. It seemed to be a great fit. But here lately, you're feeling that there's something missing. You're feeling that, there's, you're not being fulfilled. You're feeling that, there's an opportunity for you to pursue your purpose because you're not aligned. If that's you, you can send an email to admin@purposetoday.com. And so I certainly appreciate all of you for tuning in today. As a reminder, the Purpose Professionals community is available on School. You can scan the QR code for more information on the Purpose Professionals community. It's a community specifically designed for professionals and entrepreneurs who are intentional about aligning their profession with their purpose. So thank you again for watching this episode of Purpose Today with Dr. April Dobson. It has been my absolute pleasure to just share these insights with all of you today, focusing on strategic moves that senior leaders can make in their first 90 days. I hope that you have an amazing, purpose-filled day and a wonderful week. Thank you so much for tuning in for another episode of Purpose Today.